Hi, my name is Imtiaz and I'm the author of Riding Free, My Olympic Journey. This book is about my journey to the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games. I was the first civilian to represent India at any equestrian Olympic event. I was also the first civilian to represent India at the Asian Games in equestrian. Equestrian is a sport that not many people know about. It's the only sport at the Olympic Games where there's an animal involved. And that's what this book is about. This book is about the relationship between a man and a horse. It's a relationship between me and all my horses that played a part in my life, in my journey, and helped me achieve my goal. That's what makes this book a little bit special for those who are animal lovers. You must understand that relationship is so important when you're competing at that international level. I had wonderful horses that came into my life, and I was very lucky that each and every one helped me that one step closer in achieving my goal. My goal was a bit odd because ever since I was 6 years old, I wanted to represent India. I didn't even know in which sport. At first, I thought it would be in running because I was a very fast runner, and then I thought I would do it in swimming because I thought I was a good swimmer. But little did I know that horses, which has always been a part of my life, would actually be my pathway to achieving this goal of representing India at the 2000 Olympic Games. This book is for every young person who's from 8 years old to parents and grandparents. To read this book is about following your passion, living your dream, and getting out of your comfort zone. The one thing I can assure you, if you try and do something different, you are definitely going to fail. But that's not what life is all about. Life is about overcoming those failures, trying to find a way how you can get out that comfort zone and get closer to your goals because you really want it. And you'll never have enough time, you'll never have enough money, and you'll never may never have the resources. But if you wait for those three things, you will never be able to achieve your goal. So I tell people, and that's what this book about, is that go and get it now. I really hope you enjoy reading Riding Free as much as I enjoyed writing it. There were some amazing stories in there. One of the stories was when I was competing at the Asian game level, and I was trying to get to the trials, and I was left out of the team at the last minute. It shattered me, absolutely broke my heart. But I never gave up because I had the support of my parents who asked me, "What is it that you want?" And I said, "My dream is to represent India. That's what I want." And all they said was, "Get back in the saddle." So that's the kind of support I had from my family. I had lovely support from my friends. I had great support from outsiders, mentors that came into my life. And the most important is I had the best coach ever who I had when I was 11 years old. And she took me to the Olympic Games when I was 30 years old. For 20 years, I trained with the same coach. So there are lots of lovely stories like this of lovely people I met, countries I traveled, horses that came into my life, and it's all put into this book with my heart. So I really hope you enjoy Riding Free and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Welcome back to Studio One. We will now witness a cozy conversation between two friends, Nayantara Sahgal and Devaki Jain, who will talk about their books, life, relationship, and friendship. Nayantara Sahgal's works include classic novels such as Rich Like Us, Plans for Departure, and Lesser Breeds. She has received the Sahitya Academy Award, the Sinclair Prize, and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. Her novel, When the Moon Shines by Day, was longlisted for the 2018 JCB Prize. She has been a vice president of the PUCL, People's Union for Civil Liberties, and is engaged in an ongoing protest against the assaults on the freedom of expression and democratic rights. Devaki Jain graduated in economics and philosophy from St. Anne's College, Oxford, and is an honorary fellow of the college. She is a recipient of the Padma Bhushan 2006 and an honorary doctorate from the University of Westville, Durban, South Africa. Devaki ma'am, please take ahead your conversation.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks to this Pune Literary Festival group for thinking of us. And I'm so thrilled to be with Nayantara. I'm an admirer of her writings, and actually, we are friends, which is more interesting than admiration only. So, hello, Tara. Why don't you start us off on a conversation?
Uh, Here we are, Devki, on the same platform, but we've had such very different lives, very different backgrounds. Uh, and can I just say a word about those backgrounds to
Of
show
course.
how different our lives have been? You you come from a family where all opportunity and freedom was given to the sons, and the daughters were under strict control and married off at puberty and so on. I come from a family where which was fighting for freedom under Mahatma Gandhi, and that was the great revolution that brought about India's independence. But the point is, but you escaped from your controls by being sent abroad to university to total freedom. Whereas I got married to a man and into a traditional family where the man did the leading and the woman walked behind. So I went from total freedom to control. And it took me a long time to get out of that. But that's the difference in our background. But here we are on the same platform. And personally, I would like you to tell me, and I just mention that we were both, as young women, part of a newly independent India. And that was an ambiance, Nehruvian Gandhian ambiance, which was an ambiance of great idealism and adventure. And we both took part in that and contributed to it in our own very different ways. So, do you agree that is so? That we,
I'm so glad you mentioned that we did start off from the same period and the same
yeah,
aspirations. I think that's why we need not make so much of our differences in terms of the kind of family you were born in and the kind of family I was born in. But that spirit of that environment of post independence India and pre independence India also is the common ground. And I think one of the reasons why we continue to be friends and talk to each other is because we both experienced that. I think that was
yeah, yeah.
that you were a political family is so visible, and ours was not a political family and not visible. You had education, I had to fight for it. All those differences have melted because we are now actually, in my view, reading your writings, one recognizes that we are both burning with anxiety and concern about the India that we saw being birthed and the India that we see around us now. I can't bear it. I don't know what to do. I sometimes tell one of my best friends in the world is Ramila Thapar. I say, should we wear white saris and go and sit at the gate of Prime Minister Modi, 7 Race Course Road, and say, we are old women, we refuse to let you do what you're doing to India. It may sound absurd. But you know, the absurdity is that we have to find a way. And I am so happy that you do this kind of political writing. The latest book, for example, that you've written, that's what is burning inside me. And that's our similarity, Tara, that we may be born from different roots and different opportunities. But the passion of for India and the understanding of what it is very similar with both of us. And that's why I think we are finding it so nice to be in touch again.
Well, Devki, the only reason why I mentioned our backgrounds is that you escaped from that background of total control into freedom, whereas I went the other way. I escaped from, was free all my childhood, but I married into a situation where I came under control. So there we were opposites, but we both became contributors to the new India. And we were very proud to be part of that ambiance, because India was a unique country at independence. It was the first country in world history uh, to put democracy before development, before any other country had done that. And we were the first country in history to establish universal suffrage, including giving women the vote, which, in other countries women had to fight for. So, in these ways, we had a lot to be proud of. And as you were saying, we are not proud of what is happening in India today. All my novels, from the beginning when I started to write, I considered them, I thought of them as being about the making of modern India, my novels.
Yeah.
Now, the last one which you mentioned and the one I'm now writing are about the unmaking of modern India. And I think that old or young, everybody has got to not sit at Modi's gate, but to become part of this great movement of civil servants, lawyers, teachers, students, farmers, writers, who are all opposing the fascist Raj that we are under today. We are doing it, all of us. I haven't seen anything so remarkable in this country as the farmers' movement. So it's happening. We don't need to sit at Modi's gate.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I,
Yeah,
I also
yeah,
agree with you that something is happening. But I'm impatient and restless and worried because if you look at the whole range of nations that you and I have seen, Latin America, Africa, Asia, South Asia, and since I've traveled, did I ever tell you that
you
I've
have
traveled
seen.
to 93
You have
countries?
seen, Devki. I haven't. You are the traveler. I have not seen as much of the world as you have after you
So,
got away from your
so
controlled
all that
environment.
for some mission or the other, India was unusual. It was uniquely. Imagine we had so many languages, so many religions, so many
Yeah,
races.
yeah,
I mean, you have to go to Hyderabad and Bangalore to see such a mix, and then you go to Kerala, and we were all managing as if we were one. That was unique. We were not black, white, brown, but we were very different. We were managing as one country, one citizen, and feeling so thrilled about India, my India. And
yeah,
then to see it being brought back to what is happening in Latin America and Africa, where people are splintering into sub ethnic, sub national identities, that is old, and we were different. And it looks as if now we're going to go back to what we should have, what we lost or we
Mhm.
didn't have. So I can't bear it, and I'm not as optimistic as you. I really
No,
don't.
I'm not optimistic, but what I feel is one still has to act. That is necessary. Whatever
Of
is
course,
happening, we can't sit back.
of course.
We have to act. And well, writing also is a form of political activism.
Absolutely.
What you write about, the subjects you choose, and so on. So I have done it through my writing, and you have done it in a much more public way. The way you, as an economist, you went into field work about the status of women in probably to neglected rural areas which had never been uh, written about before. You've done it in this wonderful way. I sometimes think that that was the influence of Mahatma Gandhi on you, because you also knew him and he became a very big influence in your life, didn't he?
Yes, indeed.
Also,
And I like the way that you're mentioning the fact that I veered towards Gandhi. That was one thing in which the first years after I came back from Oxford and started to work, I was gripped by Gandhi's idea of restrained consumption and buying from the poor. You won't
Yes.
believe this. I asked the various modern schools like Model School, Delhi Public School, all the big fashionable upper class schools. I went and pleaded with the principals. I want to speak about Gandhi. So they said, sure, sure. So I said to them, consumption restraint and buying from the poor are the two messages. The children are so idealistic, 10th standard, 11th standard. They loved it. And they said, ma'am, how do we do it? So I gave some ideas. Within a week, the principal of the schools called me and said, madam, what are you doing? The parents of the children have come and said, you've said that in birthday they shouldn't have these expensive cakes, but they should distribute sweets to the urban children that are around the gate in the compound. So the parents were unwilling to accept any idea of sharing wealth, sharing these goodies that the upper class children have. So
Mm,
I was so gripped by Gandhi's
yeah.
idea of consumption. I must tell you, I think that was the most brilliant thing that you buy from the poor, you enable them to produce. The Khadi program, which is laughed at now, was a basic, it's what they call now basic, they now call Narega. They're trying to bring livelihood to people's homes. This was also a way of bringing livelihoods. But the brilliance was that she had already got the market and then the supply chain, and the woman who spun the khadi was the actor. So you had brought what the yarn, she bit yarn, and they went and got. Can you imagine a complete supply chain which would have given some income to all those who are right down there? I still like it, but nobody will believe that it is a good program and it looks like so idealistic. But then the consumer, that is we, you, me, have to buy
Yeah.
that. If we don't
Yeah.
buy that, buy what we have
Mm,
now buying,
mm.
there's no way. But I did
Well,
dream.
that was Gandhi's idea of his idea of politics and economics was what will benefit the last and the least. That was his economics, and
Yeah,
that's what you have tried to
yeah,
do,
yeah.
including the fact that you've been trying to fight for justice for the deprived all your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also knew Jayaprakash Narayan, so did I. And I think you had a relationship with him on at some level also, didn't you?
With who?
JP,
Oh, yes,
JP
yes.
Narayan. Yeah, yeah.
You made a comment on what I wrote to you, and I think that's a very good comment. I, when I was 21, I managed to, I don't know why, I was in a place where I was asked to write a book by no less a person than Masani about an alternative for India, because India was clashing between the Soviet model and so-called American model, especially in cooperative farming and cooperatives. So I did all kinds of wavy reading and thought of cooperatives and so forth. At that time, Jayaprakash Narayan, I was 21, he was called to release the book. So once I got in, then in the same train we traveled from Patna to Delhi. Then we became friends for a long time. Later, when he was
Okay, yeah, yeah.
birth to the Janta group, he called me and we used to take notes. Can you imagine Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Raman Lohia, all would be around a table with JP chairing in Patna, and they were
Mhm.
trying to put together the alternative party, the Janta, which of course collapsed. But I was there as a scribe, and so JP and I had a long relationship of that kind. What about you? You also knew him very well.
Very well. Well, I didn't personally know him until much later in my life, but he considered himself part of my family. He called my uncle Nehru, he called him Bhai, he called my father Bhai, he called my mother Didda, which is in a Kashmiri household that's Didi, and we say Didda. So JP knew my family very well, and my uncle thought very highly of him. So when I met him only when Indira Gandhi's emergency began, and he read what I had been writing as a regular contributor to the Indian Express on what was happening in India politically, freedom being squelched and opposition being put in jail and so on. So JP was very impressed, and he had started a weekly called Every Man's Weekly. And he asked me if I would write for it. And I said, of course. And I said, he said, I will pay you. And I said, JP, don't pay me, I'll do it for love. Although I was struggling to earn a living at that time, I had been impoverished by my divorce and I was trying to make a living through writing. And in those days, a leading article, op ed article, earned 250 rupees. So I wasn't getting very
Unbelievable.
far, but I was doing my best. And anyway, then that took me to Bihar 3 times. And JP said, please write about the Bihar movement. You, that's how it began, if you remember. The students had protested in Bihar, university students.
Tara, I know this is moving away from JP, but
Uh-huh.
I want to take a minute of your time to tell you how much I admired your mother. I say this because, there was a whole perception of Mrs. Pandit as a stylish, English speaking,
Yeah.
kind of Deshi. And then I was also terrified of that. But I was a student at Oxford and somebody introduced me to her. And she was High Commissioner in London. She just embraced me, and believe it or not, without knowing who I was. There was no question of my father's daughter and things like that. She said, "Oh, you're staying in a hostel. Come and stay with me." And overnight, I was staying in the High Commission. Then
That's
she
a lovely story, really. Yeah, yeah,
and then we lost touch. Years
yeah.
later, when she came back to India, she contacted me. She said, "Bring Lakshmi Jain." I went and saw them, and she said, "You must meet my daughters. You must meet my." And she got more sick. Have you met? Have you met? So I'm supposed to meet you and be friends with you.
Oh,
So it was so lovely. I mean, she was so fond of both of you, and she said, "You must meet them." And I think I don't know whether I told her truthfully or lie that I met you before she passed away. But she had this amazing. I don't know how it happened. Affection, 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 warm, and it.
she was. She was
I
that
wonder
kind
if
of
you
person.
remember her.
Yes. Well, she had great examples before her from Indian history of what women had achieved. Never given the credit, perhaps enough, but and even in the time of the freedom revolution, a woman like Sarojini Naidu. You remember that was about the salt law.
Yeah.
Gandhiji was breaking the salt law and had gone to Dandi and all the rest of it. And there was a salt depot at Dharasana in Dandi on the beach. And the Congress had decided to attack the depot because they were taxing salt. And that was too much for the poor Indian. That was what all that salt satyagraha was about. And Sarojini Naidu, a woman, led that huge volunteers procession to raid the salt depot at Dharasana. Amazing woman. And there were all these examples my mother had before her. And then, of course, she became an example to others herself. But Gandhiji's association with us, with my family, was, of course, as political mentor, but also as a close friend.
Yes.
And I mean, from the time of that my uncle had brought Gandhiji into the family, but he, as a guest in my grandfather Motilal's home, he was a guest there for my mother's wedding in 1921. And he attended Mummy's wedding. And yes, the funny story Mummy told us was that she and my father went to him for his blessing after the wedding. So, what do you suppose he does? He gives them a long lecture on celibacy. So, she said to him, "But we love each other. Why should we be celibate?" So, that kind of relationship, it was very informal.
And
very
that's why,
loving.
yeah, why I brought her up was, I'm sure you've written about this also. I've seen that. It's something we should talk more about. That is, suppose now she dressed up with short hair and all that. So straight away there's an image. Durga Bai dressed like I am now, white hair, bam, bam. And so I'm very patriotic, Deshi, and she's that judgment is still in some sense running in India. But we should clean ourselves of that because really people should have the freedom to dress the way they want, and their soul and their spirit and their mind is not reflected in the way they dress, I feel. Uh, so I used to defend her for that because she had a very strong English accent and she had everything looked very anglicized. So my Gandhian friends would say, बहुत विजय लक्ष्मी पहने वो तो बिल्कुल विदेशी है नहीं नहीं वो विदेशी नहीं है."
Well, it is true she had a very westernized background. She was
Yeah,
brought up by an English governess. This was in the days, when um, Congress was expecting dominion status and was cooperating. It was Gandhiji who brought in non cooperation eventually.
yeah,
But when my mother was a little girl, I mean, she brought up by an English governess and tutors at home, but she also learned Sanskrit and Hindi, not Thet Hindi, but Hindustani was our ghar ki boli. That's what we spoke at home. And she
and
was,
I'm sure, yeah, sorry.
no,
I'm
please.
sure you felt it more than I because you were her daughter, but the the relationship of with Indira, that is Indira ill-treating her and all that was really dreadful, and it hurt her. It hurt her, but
Yes,
she had
because she loved Indira and so did I. We were very
yeah,
close knit family. So when Indira departed from the family tradition and in the Indian tradition of democracy, both my mother and I opposed it very openly,
that's true.
very publicly. You will be interested to know that a biography is coming out of her very soon, written by Professor Manu Bhagavan, professor of history, and he's doing a wonderful job. And I think he's going to put a lot of conceptions about my mother right in that book, things which you've been mentioning and so on. So a lot of people will get to know her better who never knew her in life.
Coming back to our current concerns, I'm burning. I must say, I'm giggling like a little girl, but with anxiety and at the same time hope. When I see Mamata Banerjee shaking the soil, shaking things, I feel hope. I also like,
I don't feel hope. I want to dance for joy. I feel so excited by what Mamta is doing. She's wonderful. Look, she just won by a huge margin the municipal elections in Calcutta. She's doing a wonderful job. And but as I say, Devki, India is doing a wonderful job. We don't hear what do we hear but fake news now on TV.
yeah,
There's never a proper debate or argument about anything. A lot of not only Indians, well, friends and comrades are in jail now on fake charges. This wonderful Catholic priest, Stan Swami, was killed. He was killed
yeah,
by the government. I call it that because he was very ill, he was very old, he was put into
I
prison,
know.
and finally must have contacted COVID along with other problems that he had in his.
And the whole of, this, then there was this Bhima Koregaon group that was arrested, and the other day, of course, Sudha Bharadwaj has been released. And if you
Yeah,
really look at the profile
those
since
are all arrested on fake charges. That's the point. We don't hear the truth
yeah,
anymore.
you have no idea what a silly thing they were arrested on. And so there is a, so, while while I am not saying we, I'm not assuming that you have the same view, are finding the Modi show unbearable and vicious and unacceptable. There's also this other thing which I don't understand, that it's not all Modi's hands, that what happened in Maharashtra with arresting the Bhimbe Karogaon people, the way they treated them, the odd injustices that are taking place through the courts and through the CBI. I don't think it's all masterminded by Shah and Modi. I think it's also happening locally. I'm not talking of the
No, but
incarceration of Muslims
no,
and Christians.
but Devki, what is happening locally? I mean, we are seeing innocent people being lynched publicly, and the police not arresting them. Well, it is they are not arresting them because they are told it's okay, let it happen, and that comes from the top. It comes from the RSS
Of course.
headquarters. You know what else? Then the other day, this mob that went into the Gurdwara, and people were killed. And I was watching that on TV, the news about that, and the police say, "What could we do? The mob was so emotional, we could do nothing." They were told to do nothing, just as in 2002 in Ahmedabad, Modi, that was the highlight of his political career until then, where he allowed the massacre of about 2,000 Muslims in Gujarat. It
Mm.
comes from the top. These things can't happen
But
otherwise.
the uh, the tentacles come from the top, but there's also resonated, and that
Yes,
resonation, for example, in
yes,
Karnataka, which is supposed
yes.
to be my state, which was so civilized. I can't tell you, Tara. Growing up in Karnataka was very exciting. It was very civilized. The Maharaja was a liberal man. My father was mayor, then became Diwan. And it was just the tolerance of Anglo Indians, Muslims. It was a good place. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and now I can't believe that my Karnataka has become terribly Hindutva. Unbelievable for me. I can't think who are those Karnatakans who have become like that. I can't see them with my eyes. It seems
Mm, mm.
unbelievable that, and when we have this sit-in by the Muslim women about this CI law,
Yes, yes, yes. The
I
women's
went all
is
over India.
wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
In every city, we had the women sitting in protest, and I was thrilled. It was happening in Bangalore. Went to Bangalore, and there was that light of protest, tolerance. Uh, Muslims and Christians were part of our lives, all of us. There was no kind of Hindu, Muslim, Christian.
Of
Now,
course.
Karnataka,
And
hurting the churches. Have you ever heard anything as absurd as that? So look at that,
it's
and how
true.
one
Yeah.
ideological dart or spear has infected society all over. That also bombs me. How can it be that this
Mhm.
Modi and Shah's thing should penetrate so deeply into societies which are so far away? They don't even speak Hindi. So that there's something wrong, and there's some poison in our hearts which picks up this other poison. Or what do you think? Why is it happening even in far away from Delhi?
No, I think it is, as you say, there's something in the psyche which has responded to Modi. And that was an experiment he made in Gujarat to, I think, uh, make, find out for himself how far he could go, and whether a majority of people in this country would uh, agree with him, fall in line with him. And that, as you say, has happened. A majority has fallen in line, partly because I think there was a huge new voting population of the young who were felt the glamour of his campaign, the advanced technology of his campaign. 3 screens with Modi, three times his size, speaking. And I don't know if you watched any of that campaign. I did. And it was very technologically advanced. And I was thinking, there was Mahatma Gandhi, a skinny, small individual sitting cross legged on the ground. In those days, a microphone often also failed, and reaching the whole of India. I mean, this is the contrast between then and now, isn't it?
Really,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. And his beliefs in benefiting the last and the least, comparing today with the fact that this country is under the control of the billionaires. It's the billionaires are controlling everything, the seaports, the forest areas, the tribal areas where Stan Swami was working, and
Yeah.
they are given carte blanche. Do what you like, but keep us in funds. I'm writing about this in my new novel. This relationship between the political class and the business class, the upper crust business class, is you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. You do serve
And
me and I'll
this
serve you.
we this used to be the description we made of the US and others when we were students, and later that there was that nexus, and that's how they had what is called a liberal economy, capitalism, and so on. It wasn't so much here. Now
Ah,
it's
but
here.
now, yeah, no, now it's worldwide.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Literally, and that is extremely vicious for poverty removal, inequality removal. It just won't work because that it requires.
but
I
they
often
don't.
argue that.
But Devki, these people say, what is equality? Equality is not natural. That is why we have a caste system. We're not supposed to be equal. Every man is supposed to do his job. And of course, the dirty jobs are left to the whom they consider the lowest caste. They want this situation to remain. This suits them very well. And they think that equality is a Western idea, which is a very stupid idea. It has nothing to do with our culture and our heritage. And if you don't believe it, you're anti national.
Really, I mean, if the more we talk about that, more sorrow I feel that we had the opportunity, thanks to Gandhi's footprint, of what I wrote about calling the bubbling up theory of growth instead of the trickle down theory of growth. I said that if
Yes, yes. That's what
yeah,
you and all your wonderful Asian and African women colleagues were. In fact, you created this alternative to the top
yeah,
down approach which the West had.
it's possible, Tara. That's the frustrating thing. Putting cash now they give cash. Now there's something called big. That is when to remove poverty. Earlier we used to think of employment. Now they just say give 100 rupees or $100 or whatever in the hands of the poor so that they buy and they're not hungry. So it's called big in Brazil. It's called other things in other places. But actually, what Gandhi had thought was by putting a spinning wheel in everybody's house or a carpenter was exactly that. But you got a product, or at least a part of a product, as a result of that effort. And Khadi and the process of Khadi and how it prepares the economy to be just, and then maybe from Khadi machines, anything, but it was bringing every home to have a means of livelihood. Now Narega and others are done, but that's so artificial. You dig a pit and you get money, but there you actually produce something which can be marketed. There's such a big difference between being paid for work and being paid because
Yes,
it's
yes.
charity. All those ideas have been trashed. Capitalists taken over, exporters taken over. the garment factories in Bangladesh. I mean, all of this is so painful for me to watch because you and I belong to a generation where it could have been different. Those people who were born after 1995, they wouldn't know that it could be different. That's what they inherited after Manmohan 1993. But before that, you and I know that there was a possibility of some other kind of way of enriching ourselves. So
I
our
know.
generation is bleeding with sorrow
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
anxiety, and they wouldn't even know. These children who are now buying Marks and Spencer, they don't know that there was another way in which our leaders had conceived of having an
No,
economy.
they will know. They will know because of the kind of contribution that people like ourselves have made and are making to those ideals, secularism, inclusiveness, all of that, which came in with the constitution which our founding fathers had established. All those ideas were there. The freedom of expression, equality, all this was guaranteed to every Indian. All religions were treated with equal respect. All of that was there. It's not. It, they are trying to wipe it all out, but I don't think they can succeed because there is something in us, and there are enough people among us who will not allow it to
Well
die.
done. Well done. I like to believe that. I like to believe that. But I don't, I know. Let's do that. Let's believe in that, and it might spin out. Even now,
Yeah,
I
we
wear
have.
khadi, and it's so easy to have an ideology. It's so easy, but it's not there.
Yeah, well, um, what I know that all that the writers among us can do is to go on writing, to refuse to be shut up. We will not shut up. We'll keep on opening our mouths when we think we must. And we are doing that, and people are suffering for it, but still doing it. I, a couple of days ago, had a most beautiful letter from Harshmandar,
Mm,
who is now got a fellowship of some kind in Berlin. He has 5 months more to go there, in which he describes all the pains and sorrows he's been through, including serious political illness, family losses for which he is still grieving. All of that has happened to him, but he hasn't given up. So, what about you and me staying put and not giving up also? I
yes.
believe Harsh Mandar is, he is what I call a modern saint. He's a saint. What he quit the civil service immediately after that 2002 massacre in Gujarat. Immediately after that, and he immediately went to work to identify himself with the people who had lost everything, who had suffered, who had been ill treated, and all the rest of it. And Karwa Mohabbat, he called it,
Yes.
you
Beautiful.
know. And, but he's working, he's not sitting back. Whatever may have happened, he doesn't
That,
stop working.
and the other part, yeah, and the good thing about that is that a lot of wonderful other young people trailed him. It was not so many people went on the caravan. My friends, Navsharan Singh, others.
Oh, really? Yeah, yeah.
Idealism was like a magnet.
Well, there you
Others
are. Yeah,
above the
there you
class,
are. Yeah.
they found a way of expressing their own. I was very moved. But let's see. I mean, India evolves all the time, and but some days I feel yes, something will happen. Most days I feel how could we allow our the system in India to get to the point where we only have to have a Modi picture and a Modi words as the highlight of the day. The highlight of the day on all the news channels, even NDTV, is what Modi said. And all the
They've
time,
been bought. They've been bought. Many of the news channels have all been bought.
too
You
much
can't
is
count on
like,
anyone telling the truth now.
and so I find that troubling. And of course, I keep telling myself, no demagogue in the world has survived. No dictator has survived. I talk of Pinochet, you talk of anybody, you know that ultimately
Oh,
it's
let me contradict you there.
yeah,
Dictators have long, happy lives.
yeah,
They do. Look at Franco in Spain. Look at the Salazar. Oh, dictators, they survive. It's the good people who don't, but they live long and happily and die peacefully in their beds. I'm sorry to say this, but it happens, and it may well happen here. But it's only after they have died or been kicked out finally that any change can take place. But it takes the kind of effort that the farmers have shown.
yeah.
You know, you don't get anything without organizing, and you don't get anything without working damned hard for it and keeping at it. And the farmers have shown us that it
Look
can
at
be
that.
done.
That
It
was a
can be
phenomenon
done.
like Shaheen Bagh at that time. The
Yeah,
Farmers Rally at this time showed us that we are still alive, that we still can mobilize, that we can still protest, that we are fearless, that we are fearless. That was a wonderful experience. I hope that that triggers off more such courageous solidarity, large populations protesting against. I think the current thing what we should do is definitely not allow the Christians and the Muslims and their places of worship to be demolished. I think that's an issue now that we should have a way of pushing that back. We
that
can't.
too. But also we are. I think it's the first time in history that the world has gone this evil way. It's not one country or two countries or our country alone. In the whole world, we see this evil uh, kind of political situation of dictatorship, of the suppression of freedom, of artists, writers being killed. Uh, it's not confined to only here. So it's a very new situation, and that's why I puzzle about it. I'm intrigued that ये कैसे हुआ कि सारी दुनिया इस तरफ जा रही है. But it's happening. It's a whole new situation we have to cope with. And it takes more courage, therefore, and more effort, more determination. I, for one, have never submitted to being bullied. And so, en masse, we have to submit to not being bullied. We won't permit anybody to tell us that we are identified by our religion, because it's just nonsense. If we are identified by our religions, how come Pakistan broke up? Because they were not. Uh, that was no proper identity mark at all of any kind. We have to get over these.
True. There's such contradictions happening, Tara. On the one hand, that they said the girls should age of marriage is 21. That's such a fantastic progressive thing to come from a Hindutva country, and it's, it just blows my mind. And at the same time, you have uh, the so-called conversion and all that kind of attack on
Yeah,
children
yeah.
falling in love. I don't know who thought of this idea that age of marriage should be raised. It's a good idea, but it seems so in
But by law, it's ridiculous
contradiction.
to make a law of this kind. To make a law about conversions, to make this kind, nothing to do with private life, but what Hindutva believes is we uh, that there's no such thing as an individual decision, even in marriage. All these things are community decided, and the whole idea is the old Western idea that people must choose their partners, or that they must, behave in any way uh, uh, as equals to anybody. We are not equals. We are not democratic, and this so-called Hindutva is our heritage.
So when do we go and stand in front of seven?
You are still wanting
Yes.
to stand at the
Say,
gate.
stop it! Before we die, we want to see something nice happening.
Well, I'm seeing something not only nice, but something great and fearless happening in the way our people are opposing these
Yeah.
terrible things that are happening. That is wonderful. And just as it was wonderful in the old days where during Gandhiji's satyagrahas, when we talk about non-violence, well, on our side there was non-violence, but the state came with its fully armed power, and we people in those days were opposing fearlessly, standing their ground against armed power. It was
Yeah. Sure.
a
Sure.
miraculous sight, wonderful sight,
Sure.
and people are still in this country doing it. This is, I think, what we have to remember. Otherwise, we are not recognizing what the common people in India and all over the place are doing. I mean, where neighbors are helping neighbors, Hindus are defending Muslims, giving shelter to Christians. Um all this is going on, and the Sikhs have been wonderful. The way they have, served food to the people, even during the women's movement, Shaheen Bagh and all that, and ever since then, they're helping each other, regardless of religion and background. This is all happening.
Yes. That's a
It
very
gives
nice
them
thing on which we can actually, maybe, I don't know what the organizers feel about time, but it's a nice
way to end.
sentiment on which we can
Yeah.
uh, uh, reflect and feel not so destroyed or depressed or negative as I often do. But the good thing about us, Tara, is that you write and I write. And there's something I've discovered, that writing is in some sense, enabling. It helps you to live because
Yes.
you,
Yeah.
and so the chance of writing makes you feel you must live and write. It's such a wonderful um, emotion and drive. And
What are you
I
working
love,
on?
hmm?
What are you working on now?
I've always been a bit fragmented in how I choose. I started to think of writing on grandmothers. Let me say, why do you want to write? Some of grandmother's wisdom I experienced, and that's going now. And how did they get that? My grandmother got married at the age of 7, but she was as wise as a pundit. So many of my friends said, "Oh, brilliant idea, let's do it." I'm now thinking, no, I won't do that. Then I have written all my life, I've written about inequality. Inequality obsesses me. I think inequality is a poison, and it in
It
every
is.
way, and it has to
And
be. Yeah.
nothing represents it more than the caste system in Hinduism.
So I've spoken so much about it in my life. I thought now write something serious. Then the other day I met a friend. He said, Devaki, you're the only one who can write about feminism. I said, why do you say that? He said, you were, as an Indian, you adopted but you modified it. And now, of course, feminism is talked about in India, cross differences, and in
Yeah.
different pictures. And yet it's possible to create a philosophical discourse on feminism. It would sort of replace Marxism, capitalism, socialism, and an ism is a good idea in some terms. So
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
and so I'm sort of thinking and not able. At the same time, I tell myself, but Devaki, you're 88. How much research and how much writing can you do before you die to write a what should be a definitive book on feminism, not an article. I've written
Hmm.
several
Yes.
articles. So
It's
it's
very necessary, that book. You must write it.
what on feminism?
Yes, yes. There's
Why
been
do you say
a lot written and said on feminism, but why should you not write your book on it, defining it in whatever way you think it should be defined? I mean, we're in great need of it here across the world, I dare say, but I mean, we're more concerned with India.
well, the reason it attracts me is that all ideologies have sort of crumbled and others are emerging which are not. The women's voice has been an interesting, sane, often ethical voice. I don't want to generalize, but broadly, and represents a group of people who have taken a lot of taken a lot on, whether it's work or child rearing or something. So a feminist ideology which draws its roots from women's lives can be inspiring across the classes and sections of society. That's one drive to to bring an ideology into the political discourse, which which grapples with everything and at the same time provides a closure
You
to.
know, I would like my daughter Geeta Sahgal to talk to you sometime. But she's a very well-known women's rights activist and feminist,
Yeah.
and I'm sure she would be very interested in having a talk with you about the kind of book you're planning to write. At some
I'm
time, you must meet.
thinking aloud. I don't know. I don't know. I sometimes feel give it all up. Don't do anything. But what I would love it to do is to shout politics, politics. But
That's what I do in my fiction and my
but
non-fiction, both.
yes, yeah,
I said that's what I'm doing through my fiction and my non-fiction, my
you are, you are.
journalism.
I mean,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
I've read every one of your recent books. You're talking politics, and I mean, I don't have that gift, but I think it's true. It's stupid to try to write about politics, me to write about it because it goes. I would need a century of experience and write and reading, which I don't have because others who have walked in or talked about, or thought about politics, have not written great books, but at least they've got a head start on me. I don't have that. But there we are. There is still a burning desire to to defend and make India happen the way we
Yeah,
inherited in the 60s. So to make India happen, we should hold hands and think
absolutely.
together. And you write very powerfully, and there are others also. But how to,
And I have no intention of stopping. I'm
pardon?
going on. I
Pardon?
have no intention of stopping
Well done.
the novels that I'm
Yeah.
writing. I intend to go on. As you say, for that's a writer's life. We don't retire. We go on working.
I like your way of giving strong political messages through fiction and other forms of writing. It's actually a very effective way than the blunt way of talking. Uh, and so all your life
Well,
now,
no, not only writing, artists do that too through their painting. Um, the all creative endeavor, movie making also does it. There are movies which stir us profoundly with the kind of message that they give. We have great movie makers in this country too. And these are all creative endeavors working for truth, satyagraha, fighting the fight for truth. That goes on through art, I think, all over the world, but definitely in India. We have great names in the arts who cannot be suppressed. Jail them, raid them, kill them, but you can't kill the creative imagination. You can't. That lives on, and it goes on through art, doing the job of changing the world. Art changes the world, or
And we
can
should,
do.
yeah. I mean, I often think, though that sounds sometimes childish, that we must celebrate India for having survived in spite of so many pitfalls that democracy has had. I mean, you go to the African continent, you feel like weeping that countries which had brilliant leaders have now become dictators and so on. And you have South Asia is also not a paradigm of democratic, but India is a paradigm even now, in spite of Modi.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I sometimes feel how wonderful my country is still holding on. and,
It's not just holding on, it's fighting back. We are
yeah,
fighting back.
so
Yeah.
it's becoming rare. I mean, I know that you know a lot, but Latin America is finished as far as democratic politics
I,
goes.
I don't know Latin America at all, but I think we are,
Every dictators are coming back, and you must have read
yeah,
in Africa, only dictators are coming back,
yeah, yeah.
and so we are still able to have a, something. Um, so it's and unfortunately the economy is shifted too much away from an economic policy of justice, an economic
Mm.
policy of self-reliance, to a total entrepreneur industry development economy. And I can tell you that not that I know much, but it's a dreadful thing that the policy that is happening now, that you give like doles to those who are deprived, while you allow a certain type of train to run on its own wheels, with tremendous wealth creating. You must have read job creating is not happening, but wealth creating is happening. That's, the,
Yes, yeah.
that's one very tragic uh, occurrence of the Indian economy in the last 15, 20 years. I feel so sad because we had such a wonderful opportunity. The other day I heard that Amit Shah is in charge of cooperation, the institution called cooperatives. And I remembered Korean, and lot was made of Korean because some 50 years or something like that. And what a brilliant thought it was of an income in every household put into cooperative structure. But the cooperative structure is itself being destroyed in terms of what it was. It was really democratic spaces linked into a federation.
Yes, yes.
But the cooperative
Mm.
structures become also like a multinational now. So unless Amit Shah um, goes deep into how Korean made sure that it was cooperatives, that women did have a say in the whole thing, it'll again become just like what has happened to SMAS and others. The control of small scale industry, which is suffering, is through finance. And the bank literally is your puppeteer. And that's why the small scale industry, which was flourishing, is suffering now because it's still too much managed from the top. So, whereas Korean
Yeah,
managed it in a different way. And this
yes, yes.
lesson of decentralized management has to be somehow pushed, which is not being sufficiently done, in my opinion. I wonder what you think.
Well, I'm no economist, but I agree with you. I think we are being asked to draw to this
Yes, sure,
conversation
sure.
to a conclusion. And
Happy to do so.
yeah,
Tarat, wonderful. We'll talk again without the Pune.
inshallah, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah.
It was really engaging and mindful dialogue. Thank you, Nayantara ma'am and Devaki ma'am, for being our PILF guests. Next up, we have US Consulate General Mumbai presents Short Films for Social Impact. After a short break, join us for the same at 6:45 p.m.